Welcome to the second clip of Startup Psychology, the first part, the environment. Um, this clip is about why and how startups and companies, for that matter, or any individual wants to sell something, sets prices if they follow psychological pricing strategies. And here's, for instance, one cool example, maybe semi-cool, from the market research team of Pizza Hut. And what they did is they offered four ads to sell pizza, and two of those sold significantly more pizzas than the other two. And I think by now you've all looked at it. It's C and D that sell the most pizza. And they're puzzled by that finding because, rationally speaking, you could have unlimited toppings for A and B. But apparently, because we spent so much time in school, at least that was their rationale, so much time in school learning the small numbers and the small, 10 times 10 is 100, and 3 times 8 is 24, and 4 times 6 is 24, that it kind of makes us happy thinking about those numbers. So we're more likely to get a pizza with ad number C and ad number D. And of course, more famous are tactics. It's written behind my face right now, such as those, right? So instead of using a $20 or 20 euros, you would say 19.99. And there's not a supermarket in Amsterdam. I mean, okay, there's probably one or two supermarkets in Amsterdam, but there's not one big supermarket in Amsterdam where you will not find prices such as 19.99 or 19.95, which is, mathematically less than 0.5% different to 20. It's the same amount of, revenue almost, but people are more likely to buy it, because they see the one and then they perceive the price to be smaller. Or you'll see maybe less common, but still quite frequently, discount rates such as this, right? So researchers looked at if you want to offer a discount. So let's say the 49 euros is already a discount. Do you want to like yell it out and make it really big? It's like, look, this is cheaper. Look here, buy here. Or do you actually want to, dial back a little, relax a notch, and just offer a smaller font? And it seems that smaller fonts try to sell more. But first off, let me talk about one of the principles behind pricing is, of course, like our irrational brains, right? You've by now learned that startup psychology, at least the environment part, is largely predicated and funded on decision-making biases and heuristics. So irrational thinking patterns, so to speak. Our brains and even our eyes, which, like the doorway to our brains, are easily fooled. So use those visuals as a metaphor for our irrationality. So what I want you to do is like look at those two pictures and now keep in mind that they are identical. So those two images are perfectly parallel. And if you don't believe me, you use a hand and cover one of the two images. So our vision that has, developed over tens and hundreds of thousands of years, and like humans are actually pretty good at, making color distinctions and like visualizing things, right? They're still very, very easily fooled by our brains. Or here, where the lines are parallel, I could, get a pen out and draw it after, but it would be embarrassing, so I'm not going to do this. The horizontal lines are parallel, but our brain just doesn't want to let us see it. If you don't believe me, pause the video, get a ruler, get a pen, something that's a straight line, just hold it to the screen and you'll see. And those kind of, visual problems, they matter for pricing too, if you believe it or not. So there's a study by Coulter and Norberg from 2009, and Coulter and his wife, I'm not sure if this is the wife or the husband, they publish a lot. So there's two Coulters, but they're like related. They publish a lot on like consumer psychology. And what they did is they created identical ads, such as those for a pro pizza cutter. By now, if you learned I like pizza. And they ask people three things. It's like, how much are you willing to spend for it? Are you willing to buy it? Are you willing to eat it? Or how delicious do you think that is? But the bottom line here is that people are more likely to buy this pro pizza cutter. It's not about pizza, it's actually about the cutter, excuse me. If the ad is presented as I presented it here on the bottom level of the screen. So the lower ad sells significantly more pizza cutters. And the reason for it is, you can see it a little bit. I think you've caught up to it by now. Is that the 7 and the 5 are standing further apart, which creates the illusion that the discount is bigger. So now, like, stick with me because this is actually highly applied, but most people don't know or understand where this is coming from, what it means. So there's an illusion that's an optical illusion that's quite famous. Comes from, I think, even somewhere late 1800s. It's called the Müller-Lyer illusion. So yeah, Müller with a, like a German, but whatever. Like you can read it, Müller-Lyer illusion, and you've seen this kind of thing. And my face is blocking it again, but it's this idea that I have two lines that are identical, and if you believe it or not, I added those lines. You can also pause the video again and like double check. And it's hard to see. Let me just see if I can close the PowerPoint and move this stuff upwards so you can actually see it, and not my face instead, because it ruins the effect a little bit. Yeah, so you can see better here. So we know now, because I showed you this slide, we know now that the two horizontal lines are identical, yet they don't appear identically long, even though we know, right? And what is done in pricing now is this idea that, let me just grab a pen, I'll do it after all, now we can laugh about it, is that certain numbers open in certain directions. So for instance, if I would write a 6 here, right? And for those of you that are creative, they can see that the 6, I'm gonna write it again because the software doesn't let me stay it a little bit. Let me show it better. The 6 opens to the right. So it creates this error bar. And in the same vein, right, if I would write, for instance, a 3 here, and it works for all numbers but 5 and 8, I think. No, even for 5. For 8, it doesn't work. Right? If I write a 3 here again, we know that the 3 opens in that direction. So by smartly choosing my prices, I can actually create this Müller-Lyer illusion, and I can actually, you keep in mind the images you saw before, I can actually create an illusion of a bigger discount, for instance. And I think Google Chrome wants to tell me that my video is done. Nice. Just going to save this. Don't get distracted, and then we move on with it. So this is used in pricing as well, and it's not well known, but by strategically choosing numbers in your prices, you can create a bigger discount, for instance. More cognitively than visual. Now we're actually talking about thinking. People, and there's also the studies from the US, that's why there's dollar prices here. People perceive the price 27.82 to be more expensive than the price 28.16. And usually I would ask that in class interactively, and people get it after a while, but the reason behind it is that 27.82 has way more syllables than 28.16, right? And I offered the syllables here. So it's harder to speak, it's cognitively maybe more demanding to process, and therefore it's perceived as bigger. So, and basically that pushes us away a little bit from this visual illusions and instead opens the door to cognitive thinking patterns that are used against us when it comes to, us buying stuff that we maybe don't need. And I'm going to talk about 2 or 3, 2.5. One is going to be, you can do something there. Biases that are really common or that are also really cool in pricing that you've encountered on a daily basis, but they're extremely impactful still, although we know about them quite well. And the first one would be what's called the anchoring heuristic. And this is a market research study from Sukli and Lichtenstein, and I forgot a bracket down there for the nitpickers among you. And what they do is they're literally using a bar on campus. It's not a Dutch bar, obviously, it's in the US somewhere, where people buy beers. They drink the beers. And every week they change the menu a little bit. So they try things out, and the dependent variable is literally how many beers are sold and how many beers of which brand. So, and they did that across multiple studies, and they just changed the menu. That's all they did. They just changed the menu, and they said for the first week, what we did is we ordered the beers by the cheapest beer being on top. Like a Heineken for $3 and then an Amstel for $4. And of course, the price is off. I just made it up. But this is kind of the prices, the logic they used, right? So they had ascending prices. The lower it went, the more expensive it got. And then another week, they flipped it around. So they're descending instead of ascending prices, or vice versa, depending on how you want to explain this chart. And they started with the expensive beer. So the fancy IPA, sold for $6 or €6 a bottle. And then it got cheaper to the bottom. Same portfolio, same beers. And on average, customers paid 24 cents per bottle more, or euros in that case. I didn't adapt that either. So the idea is that just by flipping it around and starting with a high price, people then bought, let's say they bought the iNatte more often now. So I'm not saying that the bottles are bought for the same price and the store is actually making a bigger profit, but people are spending more money. So that's a crucial fact here. And if you assume that there's a bigger margin on more pricey beers, then the bar will also make a bigger profit. So just by, if you want to ever open a bar or sell multiple products of a product line, whatever, you can use an anchoring heuristics. Quite straightforward, right? And that's called the anchoring bias, right? So we overstate the reliance of a piece of information that we see first. So I think the image here on the right hand side is quite a good illustration. Also, what's done in studies is this idea is also Kahneman, again, Nobel laureate, keep that in mind. You would have 5 seconds to estimate the equations that are printed below. So like 8 times 7 times 6 times 5. And of course, we all, somewhat college educated and not the dumbest people around. And we know that mathematically they're equivalent. But still, if I would give you the 8 up front and give you 5 seconds to estimate the number, it's like somewhere in the 40,000s actually. It's very high. And your estimate would be higher than this. And the beauty about this anchoring bias is that it even works across domains. So I could tell you something about certain trees that reach a height of 50 meters, and then I'd ask you, I don't know, when did Gandhi die, right? And when I told half of you about trees that reach 30 meters, you would judge him to have been dying a little younger as compared to a group where I told you the sequoia trees almost reach 100 meters, and then you think he dies, closer to his hundreds. So just by throwing in a random piece of information, you are mentally drawn to this number. In that case, anchoring bias tends to work on numbers, and use that information, that independent piece of information, in a subsequent, judgment task. So I can throw you off. And for you, it means if you ever want to start a business, of course, people are always anchored. And if you have competitors in your field that do something similar, they're probably also anchored by their prices. So keep that in mind. And I think here you see the relevance for startups and their pricing strategies. It's quite straightforward. It's not rocket science. But then maybe a question for you, and you can take 2 seconds, and I'm just going to grab myself a water or have a sip of coffee. Why, except for business reasons and transport reasons and logistics reasons, but cognitively speaking, why do you think IKEA products, for instance, and there's other products too, come unassembled? And of course, there's no perfect answer to that question, and there's probably wrong answers too, but there's a large variety of true answers. The answer he was looking for is it's called the self-perception theory. That's the underlying psychological mechanism, and it's Bem, and he wrote I think it's a book chapter, 1972, for those of you that are really keen on finding out. And it's this idea that by building those products, by investing our heart, blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, right? Those products gain an emotional value, so they become more valuable to us. So we observe ourselves, third person kind of thing, struggling building those things, and therefore we assign a certain additional value to it. So this is also the theory that explains why if you're really frustrated and you want to go and punch a punching bag to blow off steam, it doesn't work. It actually gets you worse. It gets you more frustrated because you observe yourself really being aggressive and angry towards this punching bag, and thus you do not decrease your anger, you actually might even build it. So I'm not saying it's always the case, but this is what self-perception theory suggests. So by sending out an unassembled product, we are building those products, and of course you could call someone and have him or her build it for you, but we are investing something into it, and we describe a higher emotional evaluation to it. So it's also this idea why you see a freaking this ugly 10 euro table at might be beautiful, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, in one of your friends or your own apartment. It's like every student home, a lot of households have those kind of tables because people built them themselves. Also, they feel like they created something, sense of accomplishment. They like them more. Long story short, and it's also related to an effect that is called. It's the second big effect that's used. It's called the endowment effect, and it's like things that we own, right? We tend to overvalue. So what they did is, and this is all behavioral studies, and the study here I'm citing is from the 90s, but it goes back all the way to the 60s. So they would just, people do study, and then they can, in the beginning, the instructor would tell you, as a reward, you can get a pen that's worth €4, you can get a mug that's worth €4, And then they randomly assign the reward after the study, and then they have people can, sell the mug back, but they would not sell it back for like €4 or like a small margin. Instead, they want to have more money, like 450 or 460 or 470 to part with it. And they're also not willing to switch, although maybe initially they wanted the pen. So it's like by just owning something, right? When it's in our possession, well, not legal possession, just like in our grasp, in our vicinity, and we feel ownership, a sense of ownership and entitlement. We assign a certain value. We form attachment, in other words. And this is basically the reason, or this is one of the reasons. We'll talk about another principle behind it later. But this is one of the reasons why Carship, if you want to buy a car, Carship salesmen or even tech products give you free trials. It's like, right, you take this car out and you drive around and you feel it and it feels like it's yours, and like mentally you already form this sense of ownership of it. You become attached to it, and then you're more willing to spend a lot of money on it. So you become attached. You feel a sense of endowment. So this is this endowment effect. It's quite straightforward. And the last one is actually I want you to do something here. I'm not going to tell you how the effect is called because that might influence what you do. Just picture yourself as having enough money that buying a subscription of any kind is not expensive to you. It doesn't really hurt, right? And I want you to choose a magazine subscription. And the people among you that whose birthday, I'm not, it's private information, whose birthday is on an even day, right? So let's say it's the 2nd of a month or the 4th of a month or the 6th of a month and so on. You get the pattern, right? On an even day, go to menti.com and enter the number that's printed here, 69, 85, 99. And it will get you to one chart. And the people among you, the students that whose birthday is on an odd number, right? So the 1st of a month, the 3rd of a month, the 5th of a month, etc. Go to menti.com and enter 10, 50, 45, 54. I'm a little bit dyslexic when it comes to numbers. 29. 10, 54, 29. Enter this number, and you'll also choose a subscription. And I split this before by months, right? So people before July can choose the first number after. But actually, I learned that birthdays are not equally distributed across the year, so that's why I switched it around to even and odd days. And what this bias is all about, I will tell you in the next video right after this one. So please go there and fill it out. It's actually pretty cool. I like this one. See you in a sec. And if you like it, hit subscribe. Obviously joking. I don't care.